Hello, everybody. It's Kim Scott back with the Just Work podcast.
Hi, everyone. It's Ernest Adams joining Kim Scott for episode 3. Excited to be here.
Very excited to be here. Ernest, thank you so much. I have to tell you that as a result of feedback from other folks and also just feedback from my gut, as we have been reading sections of Just Work, I realized I should have edited it one more time before it got published.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Which is painful. It's a painful realization, but it's also great because the paperback is coming out and there's the opportunity to offer a revised version of the book for the paperback. So that's a long-winded way of saying I'm going to read some revised. We're starting now. Chapter 1 of the new Just Work is going to be, and we're going to change the title also.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Uh-oh. Do you have that title picked out yet?
Tentatively, but now that everything is being edited, I can change everything every 5 minutes, which is my happy place. So the title right now is Radical Respect. What do you think?
Oh, I love it. Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense to me.
Feel free to write in if you hate radical respect, if you love radical respect. We'd love to hear from listeners. All right, so let's jump in. You ready?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, this is the beginning of the new chapter 1. A big part of why I wrote this book is to recognize the essential role of people who stand up to injustice. For every bad experience I've had as a woman in the workplace, I've had multiple good experiences with people who were there to help me navigate and offer support. I am so grateful to these friends, colleagues, employees, bosses, and even strangers. They are upstanders, and they far outnumber the people who cause harm. Upstanders fuel my optimism that we can solve the problem of workplace injustice. Upstanders have a responsibility to intervene. Upstanders are essential to a culture of radical respect. Not only do they help targets of bias, prejudice, and bullying feel less alone and less gaslighted, they also provide clear feedback to the person who caused harm in a way that minimizes defensiveness and maximizes the odds that the offender will make amends. Everyone feels better about the workplace as a result. Upstanders also lead by example, encouraging others to do the same. They demonstrate that disrupting bias, prejudice, and bullying can be done without as much risk as many people fear. They create a virtuous cycle. If you witness bias, prejudice, or bullying, you don't want to be a passive bystander who simply watches harm being done, perhaps feeling bad about it, but not doing anything about it. Instead, you have a responsibility to take action to intervene. Admittedly, you can't always solve the problem, but you can always show solidarity with the person who is being harmed. That acknowledgement that something is wrong here is invaluable. In homogeneous environments, being an upstander is crucial, especially if you're in the majority group. Being part of a small minority or being a minority of one is exhausting. Let's say each person in a group of 10 says or does something biased once a week. If you're the target of that bias, you're experiencing it 9 times a week, even though each person is doing it only once a week. It's not fair to ask the one person both to put up with that annoyance and to do all the work of educating everyone. So I'm going to stop there. We can read more, but I would love to get your thoughts on starting with upstanders instead of people harmed.
Yeah, I like it, Keb. I like it. I think, what comes to mind in a very visual picture is you're talking about upstanders and that one person who's taking it over and over again. I just think of a paper cut.
Yes.
And you think about every day you cut yourself in that exact same spot.
Yeah.
That paper cut is now going to turn into a pretty sizable wound.
Yeah.
And that wound is going to be one that is going to be very difficult to heal.
Yeah.
Because how, the place it is, how annoying it's going to be. And that's exactly what I think you're talking about. So I think it is great. The thing that comes to mind for me, Kim, is how does a person become an upstander? Right? Mm-hmm. Because, it's easy for us to say, stand up in the face of bias, prejudice, bullying. But for a lot of people, it's really difficult to step into that role and say, I'm going to use my voice.
Yeah, yeah, really hard to do it, and it also feels. I want to acknowledge that it feels risky. It feels
Yes.
risky.
Yes.
So one of the things that I talk about early on is the reason why it may be safer than it feels for
Mm-hmm.
upstanders. Because if I agree with you, I really love the paper cut analogy. The other analogy that I use is it's like repetitive stress injury, right?
Yes. Yes.
And but the thing is that with paper cut or repetitive stress, these are things that we do to ourselves. But
Yes.
with bias, prejudice, and bullying, it's things that other people do to us.
Mm-hmm.
And for the upstander, especially the upstander on a homogeneous team, or for the person who caused harm, it feels to them like no big deal because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they made a mistake, but it was just just I just said the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But if you're on the receiving end of it and it's the ninth time that week the same thing has happened, it is a big deal actually.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's where upstanders can play such a vital role because the upstanders, their strength in numbers. If
Mm-hmm.
you're an upstander, you are you're one of a group of people,
Right.
and it's also you're more of a neutral third party, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
easier actually and more efficient. I like the
Yeah.
efficiency. There's a justice argument to standing up to injustice,
That's
but
true.
there's also just an efficiency argument. Like it's much
Mm-hmm.
easier for the person who said or did the bias or prejudice or bullying thing to hear it from someone else than to hear it from the person they harmed.
That's true.
I
That's true.
think.
It feels less personal. It feels less personal, and it feels. I think that person can come at it from a different point of view. I mean, you made a comment and you said a homogeneous team. An upstander is a part of the majority in a homogeneous team. I also, Kim, go to my mind. I mean, I had an experience in my career where I had working at one of the Fortune 500 companies that I worked for, and a very senior one of the members of the C-suite was a black man,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the only black man on that C-suite. But you know what? What I often found was he was able to be an upstander
Yeah.
for across all because of his level and his
Yes.
position as well, right? Where he was still the only one in the room, but he was able to be an upstander for gays, for Asians,
Mm-hmm.
for Latinx populations. And so I think also there is upstanders come in many different sizes, formats.
Yes.
It just really just depends on who has that ability to be able to step forward.
Yeah, and I think it's natural if you are underrepresented along some dimension. It comes more naturally, perhaps, for you to recognize the different forms of bias, prejudice, and bullying, and to be compassionate, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't. I would argue it wasn't fair that the one black man in the C-suite had to be the upstander for everyone. Like if there were nine other, uh,
Yeah.
white people in that C-suite, they should have. They should. Why should all the
I,
work fall to the one person who's underrepresented?
I agree with you. I agree with you. There's a fairness argument there. However, I remember having many conversations with him to say, he would express he was tired. He was
Yes.
tired of always
Yeah,
being the
of
one.
course.
And my conversation to him was always back, but we need you
Yes.
in the fight, right?
Yes.
Because if he's sitting in the seat, so again, it goes back to something we talked about. I think it was in episode 1, which is around privilege. If you're sitting in that seat, you have the opportunity to do so. But if I go back to the question I asked you around the character traits that it takes to become an upstander, I mean, I think one that you talked about compassion. You also talked about empathy, and this to
Yeah.
me is like the quintessential defining leadership trait of a quality leader in 2022, 2023,
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
the ability to be empathetic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you
And
can do that, it doesn't seem so threatening anymore.
yeah. Yeah. And I think to see beyond your own lived experience. So
Yes.
so if I were talking to that C-suite, I would have tried to spend a lot of time with all the white people in the C-suite, saying that, like, it's just not reasonable to expect the one
Yeah.
person to do all this work. This
Yeah.
is the work of management. Like if you want to create a team that is
Hmm.
optimized for respect and collaboration, this is
Yeah.
work that everyone has to do. You can't leave
Yeah.
it to the. I mean, it's true. It is
Right.
true that that the underrepresented person on a lot of the work falls to that underrepresented person, but it's not fair
Yeah,
either.
I agree. I agree.
Um,
Kim, the other thing I love about this framework is, I've worked at large companies. You've worked at large companies. Not every company is large, right? I'm doing some work with a startup right now. Smaller organizations who haven't defined leadership principles yet and who haven't done that
yes,
work. The language of upstander is language that can be implemented quickly
yeah,
without having done the whole leadership competency development work,
yeah,
right? Because you can just say, this is really around being an upstander, using your voice to make sure that people are being nice to each other and getting shit done.
yeah. Being like fundamentally kind, and being kind doesn't mean lowering your standards.
Not
It
at
means
all.
raising
Not at
your
all.
standards. Actually,
Yes.
I
Yes.
think there's another couple of things that are springing to mind as you're talking, Ernest. One is there was a woman I knew, a white woman I knew, who was the only woman on a leadership team in the
Okay.
C-suite,
Okay.
and the CEO of that company was a misogynist. I mean, there's just no
Okay.
other way to put it. and
It's
and
unfortunate.
yes, it is
Yeah.
unfortunate, but it happens.
Yeah.
And he would say things like someone was up for promotion to vice president, and the person who was up for promotion was a woman, and he
Okay.
said of her, "Oh, she's got great tits and ass.
Oh
Let's
god.
promote." You know,
Oh
and
god.
I know, and this was like a well-known company, and the woman the on his team kind of looked around the room because there were a
Mm,
number of other men on the
it's happened
team,
many times. Yeah, happened many
yeah,
times to
who
me. Yeah. You
could
look.
have said something,
Is anybody else hearing this? Is anybody else
yeah,
hearing
yeah,
this?
and I knew a lot of the other men on that team, and a lot of them were wonderful. I'm sure they were just as appalled by
Mm,
what he
mhm,
said as the woman on the team was,
mhm.
but nobody said anything, and she really felt bad about not being an upstander in
Of
that
course.
moment. But
Yeah.
she said, it shouldn't be my job and my job alone to point out that this is not acceptable. This kind of behavior is not
Mhm,
acceptable.
mhm.
And it's unfortunate that none of the men in the room whose eye she caught didn't step up
Yeah.
and be the upstander. So I think like that's an example of real
Wow.
upstanding. And I think part of the reason why it's so important is obvious. I mean,
Yeah.
he shouldn't have
Yeah.
said that, and it
Yeah.
wasn't fair to the woman who was up for promotion, who's actually went on to be a very important executive at this company, by the way. Um, but the other thing is, I'm sure that not only did it bug her later, I'm sure it bugged several of the men in the room later. And I really
Yes.
thought about this recently. My son, who's a white boy, saw one person bullying another person at
Okay.
school, and he didn't know what to do, and so he
Yeah.
didn't do anything, and it bothered him for weeks after. And so I think it's important to remember, if you're not, there's an enlightened self-interest aspect to being an upstander.
Yes.
Because if you're not, you wind up being slimed by someone else's bad behavior. And it wakes you up at 3 a.m. Like the bullet, if you don't stand up, then you yourself kind of get bullied because you're not being your best self.
That's right. I mean, I have a quote. I think I talked about this in our first episode, which is just really, I heard someone say this, which is if you choose not to stand up for what's right, then you're choosing to have inner turmoil and conflict in your life.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Which I think is what
That
you're
is
saying. And
really beautifully said. I'm going to steal that.
yes, I mean, it is. I think it's so poignant. But another public service announcement I want to make, which is that don't come back to that woman after the meeting and say, I'm really sorry that he said that. Because
Yeah.
here's the thing, if you choose not to be an upstander in the moment, don't go expect empathy from someone afterwards
Yeah.
for not upstanding in the moment, right?
Yeah.
I've had that happen so many times, Kim, where someone will come up to me afterwards. I can't believe he said that in the meeting. And my response always is back to that person, why didn't you say something back?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. Although I will say that sometimes I feel the incessant apology and demanding empathy of the people who are harmed is bullshit.
It's bullshit.
Totally agree. 100% agree. I also like there was one time when I think I told this story before, but when I was on stage with two colleagues who were men, we were being introduced, and the guy
Yeah.
shook the one guy's hand, and then he kissed him like he slobbered. He didn't just kiss my hand; he like slobbered on my. It was disgusting, you know. And that was bad. Like that was bad enough. But what was almost even worse was that nobody came up to me afterwards and said, "Gosh, that was gross. I'm sorry. Are you okay?"
Yeah.
So I think when there's an organization that used to be called Hollaback, and they changed their name, and I can't remember what it is, but they have this thing called the 5 Ds for being an
Okay.
upstander. You
Okay.
want to do it, if possible, directly, like say
Yes.
something in the meeting if you can.
Yes.
That's ideal.
Yep.
But sometimes delaying and just checking in with the person later
Mm.
is legitimate. I mean, not doing it as a way to let yourself off the hook for not
Yeah.
having stood up,
Yeah.
but just to check in with that person, because if you don't, then often they feel gaslit. Like, did anybody else know that he said that he said that thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think also sometimes just creating a distraction can be helpful in the moment. If the person who's being harmed is, is kind of in danger and you're not sure what to do about it. So like there's this, a funny example of this. I don't know, funny, but a notable example of this is uh, called Snack Man. Somebody was getting on a subway. Her boyfriend was kind of chasing her onto the subway, and it was not clear if she was okay.
Okay.
And there was a guy on the subway car, and he didn't like what was happening, but this guy was kind of much larger than he was, and he didn't know what to do, so he threw his potato chips everywhere. And it created a distraction, and she actually jumped off the train as the doors shut, and so like that was better than nothing.
Yeah.
You can also delegate. You can find, like, that was what the woman on the team was trying to do by Catch Someone's Eye. Like, ask someone else to deal with this if you don't feel. Or you can document. Like sometimes just put, and you want to be careful how you document, and you don't want to post it on social media without checking in with the person who got harmed. But
as an HR guy, I like documentation, right? It's always helpful.
Yeah.
Kim, I hear all that, and I have mixed reactions to it. I think the 5 Ds make sense to me, but I think it also depends on frequency.
Yeah.
Of how many times it happens.
Yeah.
Right. If this happens weekly in staff meetings.
Yeah.
And you choose to create distractions every week.
Yeah, that's
instead
not okay.
of saying it's not okay, right? Or if this happens and I think don't come up to me afterwards every week.
Yeah.
For a month after these meetings and say, I cannot believe he still keeps saying that.
Yeah.
When you're one of the majority in the room and you could actually disrupt it and you could actually stop it. You know what I mean? So I think frequency is really important, and also severity of it.
Yeah.
Because if this is something that is really serious, I think I think those make sense to me. I would just put in place a couple qualifiers, I think.
Yeah. You know what else that's coming to mind is that it really depends on what your role is. If you're a leader,
100%,
like all those
100%.
all of the peers of your colleague who's the only black man in the C-suite, and my colleague who's the only white woman in the C-suite. Yes. All her peers, all their peers, all his peers and her peers had power, and so it was their obligation to intervene.
Absolutely.
I think, and intervene directly. They had the power. There's a in this first chapter, I start with an example of how this works.
Okay.
Should I read it?
Yes,
and
that'd be great.
Tell me if you think I should delete this story or if you like it.
Okay.
This story is called The Baby Shower. A manager, Todd, walked into his staff meeting one morning complaining because he had to attend unconscious bias training that afternoon. I don't believe that unconscious bias is a real thing, he declared.
Oh boy.
Ever heard that before?
Oh boy.
Yeah. Here we go. It was an uncomfortable moment. Todd had 7 people on his team, 6 men and 1 woman. The men were squirming in their seats uncomfortably, each wishing the other would say something to Todd, who was notorious not only for his bias, but his prejudice and bullying as well. They all felt slimed by his bad behavior. Adriana, the only woman on the team, decided not to say anything. It was her job to be a great software engineer, not to educate Todd about his attitudes and behaviors. She wished someone else on the team would say something, though. Later in the meeting, a man named Ty offered to buy a baby gift for another colleague who was going out on paternity leave. Nah, Adriana will do it, Todd replied, gesturing toward her with his thumb. Women are better at that sort of thing.
Oh boy.
This is a real story. Adriana was in the middle of a critical project on a tight schedule. She didn't have time to collect money from 30 people, select a gift, buy it, and wrap it. But she did it anyway because it seemed faster than arguing with Todd. As a result, her schedule slipped a bit, which slowed down the work of 4 other people as well. Meanwhile, her colleague Ty had just wrapped up a big project and had a little slack in his schedule. That was why he offered to buy the gift in the first place. He felt bad about the whole thing. He didn't say anything, but he knew how busy Adriana was and he felt bad. The whole thing was so stupid and woke him up a couple of times in the middle of the night. He felt weak for not pushing harder. These moments can sabotage an organization that's running smoothly. When office housework tasks default to the person on the team with the least time to do them, that person's productivity takes a hit. And when one person's productivity takes a hit, the whole team's work suffers. Let's go deeper on how the men on Todd's team could have used an I, it, or you statement to be a better upstander and to intervene. The kinds of bias, prejudice, or bullying that may be happening on your team may be very different. Maybe they have nothing to do with gender and everything to do with race, religion, or political affiliation. No matter what kind of bias, prejudice, or bullying is happening, you can intervene. So, what do you think about that? It needs editing. I hate reading my stuff because I see all the problems with it. That's why it's so hard for me to read. But anyway, it'll get
There's a couple
better.
places to streamline it. Yeah, a couple places to streamline it. But I think the overall story, seen it happen many times, and I think that's right. I think it's right that look, that was a great place where he chose inner conflict in his life because he chose not to do the right thing, right? But you know, Kim, what else comes to my mind is that's a great situation where being an upstander in this situation could have been he could have gone to Adriana and said, "Hey, look, I'm sorry that happened. I'm still going to go do the gift."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm still going to go do. I'm still going to do it.
Yeah, he didn't have to even argue with Todd.
100%, right? And I think that could have been another way of being an upstander. So, to your point earlier, there's multiple ways of demonstrating that because in that moment, demonstrating being an upstander to support Adriana, versus being an upstander to disrupt Todd were 2 different things, and there were 2 opportunities there. I think to be upstanders.
Yeah, and I would say there's also a third opportunity, which someone else on the team who's dependent on Adriana's work could say, "Hey, I need Adriana to finish her work. Let Ty buy the damn gift." You know, that probably would have been and then Todd maybe would have said, "Oh yeah." And, you know, and then they could decide, do they want to engage more deeply with Todd about the fact that what he expressed was probably not unconscious bias. It was actually prejudice, you know?
Yeah. And there's, I mean, like my mind goes so many places with that one, Kim. We're going to have to pick it up on the next one. But, you know, like what if Adriana in that case would have stood up for herself and said, "I got work to do here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that." Right. Like, where does that go then? And what path does that go down? I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Or I don't have kids either. Like, and Joe over there, he's got 3. He probably knows.
Exactly. I've seen that situation play out too. But I think that's a great example. And it's almost like a choose your own adventure. Yeah. Because there's so many different ways that one could actually play out.
Yeah, and could have played out in a way that would have been both more fair and more practical, like where people could have got shit done fast and fair.
I mean, you know, you read that example and ultimately your mind just goes through, God, we get in our way so much of just being good fucking people.
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, if he would have just treated her with respect, you know, and Radical respect. And as I've said to many leaders, would you want someone doing that to your daughter? Would you want someone doing that to your wife?
Yeah.
Typically, they're going to say no. And I'm like, then why are
Yeah.
you doing it to somebody else?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's really. It's rough, and yet, it is. This is. This is the work that we need to do in order
Yes.
to in order to achieve the results that we want to achieve. I think there's so often people think that talking about bias, prejudice, and bullying is the distraction, but it's not. It's bias,
It's not.
prejudice, and bullying that are the
That's right.
distraction.
That's right. That's right. Well, good luck. Good work on the rewrite so far. I think it
Thank you.
is. I think it is coming along nicely. And I really love the opportunity, like I said, for every person, no matter who you are, no matter what your leadership frameworks are in your company, to use language of upstanders, to use this language of bias, prejudice, bullying, because it really does establish a common vocabulary quick that's rooted in humanity, not in a leadership framework.
Thank you so much, Ernest. I've got several things I'm stealing from you to put in the book.
Excellent.
Maybe you're going to become a co-author.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Oh, that'd be amazing.
All right.
All right,
Thank you
cool.
so much, everybody.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Take care.